Thank you so much, Diana. Okay, I need to present. First of all, when Dr. Ada asked me to give this talk, I really didn't know what was the background about. So I think many of it has already been mentioned. So probably I'll just run through it. Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, yes, we can see.
Okay. So and my audio, I assume is one. Okay. I'd like to thank the organizers for this for inviting me to this talk, and I hope it's more of a sharing session because from my experience, I hope that because when Dr. Ada told me, she said like I really don't know how you can help us with assessment. So I think they know quite a lot. Okay, I've seen much has been said. What I'm going to say, even with Prof. David and Dr. Aziza talking about having this this relationship with your students are actually very important when you actually want to assess them, especially when we are talking now during this pandemic and when we don't even see our students, we don't even know who they are, especially those who come in for the first time and they are joining our class the very first time. Okay, I think when the idea that I got from the organization is like, okay, we are doing online examinations, and our main concern is actually students might be cheating during exams. Okay, and it is understood that students actually cheat when they feel pressured, okay, or they're stressed, and students are actually feeling a lot of this, especially during this pandemic. So we need to reduce their pressure and stress, but at the same time we need to know that they have actually achieved their learning outcome. Okay, so you need to create the environment. Okay, so students who feel connected, supported, and encouraged are less likely to cheat. And I think all our three speakers earlier did mention it, and some of them are practicing it too. Okay, so one of the ways that you can do is, I think, let each student know, or let each student tell you what might affect their performance, okay, and how you can help support them. So there's many online platforms that you can use to have these conversational chats with them, so that you know how you can actually give them the flexibility, okay, to and offer encouragement, especially when it comes to deadlines in your assessment. Because I think some of us are very strict when it's face to face, but when it comes in this type of in this during this time, I think there is a need to be flexible. Okay. And I think it's also important for lecturers to have a conceptual change about assessment. Okay, so assessment is not about just getting the bell curve, and I want a certain amount of students to get A, or certain amount of students to get B or C one, but actually helping, if possible, all students to achieve their learning outcome. Okay, and the focus of assessment should be about the learning process. Okay, and I think Dr. Ada has actually explained it very clearly, if you in terms of chemistry, how going back to the students, giving them feedback and all that, and not simply of, oh, do you know this or do you know that? Okay, have you learned this or have you learned that? Okay, so assessment for learning actually encourages giving descriptive feedback. So assessment for learning is more about using assessment for teaching and learning, and it's not so much as opposed to assessment of learning, where you do it at the end, and some of them we call it sometimes as summative assessment. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here is I kind of focus my talk for during this pandemic. As much as we are stressed, I think some of the students are even in worst of shape. Okay, parents are losing their jobs, they are not with their friends, they are not connected. They are in their peak. I mean, they are in their prime time when I think they need to socialize. So as lecturers, okay, when we want to use assessment, we do not use the assessment to rank them, but we use that assessment process or your assessment task or whatever activities that you want to give them to help them reach their learning goals. Okay, and here is you can ask them whether their assignments are average or developing, or are they meeting the learning targets, or have they exceeded the learning targets. Okay, and I think it's important for students at developing stage to give them opportunities and support to revise their work. So don't bother about whether it's an A or B or C, but give them feedbacks to tell them, okay, you are in this range. I think we can do more about this so that you can achieve this. Or yes, you have been reaching this aspect, which I really want to see this. Or yes, you have gone beyond that. Okay, so for those who are still in the developing stage, I think this is time where we give them chances to revise their assessment and also push them towards working towards the exceeding range. That means it's not like, I think many of us have this concept that if I give you a quiz, it's unfair for me to help you. I mean, the marks is final. It shouldn't be that way. The process of quiz or whatever it is, depending on your course, okay, is how important is it that they should just get the right answer? Or is there some other way that you can support or help them to learn more? Okay, so the assessment, it should be geared toward figuring what instruction students need next. Okay, so that means what can I do now? So where are they now? How can I help them? How can I make sure they reach the learning outcome? Okay, and lectures must have the assumption that all students can meet this learning outcome. Okay, so we must have in our mind that we are going to help all students. Okay, and helping all students, we cannot help them with one size fits all. There will be different scaffoldings or feedback that you need to give particular group of students as compared to other group. Okay, sometimes they need time, because I had one student who just had to upload a video, and she said she spent 2 days trying to upload the video, but she said, doctor, it's just going into one section and it's stopping, it's not fully uploading, and she became so stressed. So sometimes it is not about the time. It's or how can you say, okay, okay, it's okay, calm down, try some other time or something like that. So assessment for learning will actually lead to authentic assessment. Okay, so what is authentic assessment? Is actually engaging and worthy problems or questions of importance that students must use. So in your field, what are the problems that the students must engage in? Okay, and things that actually are faced by or in their profession. Okay, and this authentic assessment usually do not have right or wrong answer. So there should be a lot of discussion going on in the classroom. Okay, and as I said just now, it should be about formative, okay, and it shouldn't be summative. Okay, and it's not to pass judgment, so it's not like, oh, you got a C or you got a D, but how, if you say this, okay, or if you've written down this, why did you write this? Okay, and how can we improve on that? So no, I got this saying about a teacher who says, I'm trying to write my exam in a way it won't help them if they look up things. And I think that is what we need to move towards. Okay, and I know it's quite difficult for science bases, because we always have a right or wrong answer. Okay, but there are many ways that we can do it. Okay, we can use case studies or scenario based projects, like what Dr. Eda said just now. You can use take a video and then do some steps that are not correct or semi-correct, and see who can flush out those one, and how do they think they can improve on that activity. Okay, and even if you need to do traditional exams, you can always enrich the the level of authenticity. Okay, so instead of using multiple choice or true and false question, maybe you can use short answers. Okay, ask them to record it, okay, or discuss it, and then you can interview the students based on these recordings, so that you have an understanding of where their learning progress is and how much you can support them. So I think many lecturers now are moving away, like just now, using videos or case studies, or they are moving away from the normal paper and pencil that we are using. But then it comes to the next question, is how do we set this type of questions? How do we because I thought I was going to for only chemistry lecturer. So, and my chemistry knowledge, as I think I left the chemistry faculty about nearly 30 years ago. So I didn't want to bring out any questions because I know what is the advancement in this field. So I'm just using something simple. Okay, maybe in your face-to-face examination, you ask students to calculate the calories of food using calorimeter. And now you have online assessment. Okay, so you might want to modify that question a bit, because if you ask them just to use a calculation using the formula Q is MC theta, whatever it is, many of them will definitely look it up in the internet, or as what Prof. David said, look, ask an expert and all that. And when you get answers that seem to be perfect across the board, you cannot accuse anyone and say, look, I think you cheated. That, I mean, it's not fair for you to do that. Okay, and it is something, and if you don't get those variation in your marks, some students do get frustrated. The good students will say, look, I'm putting in a lot of effort. I'm doing this online assessment without looking at any help, because I want it to be like whether I know it or not. And then on the other end, you have students who just cut and paste from places and put it in and without understanding it. So they become frustrated when you tend to give them all the same marks. So the good students tend to start getting frustrated. Oh, why I want to work so hard? And then the students who are at the end, oh, okay, this is quite a nice format of doing assessment when we have an open book assessment. Okay, so if you're talking about authentic assessment, maybe you can say, you can give them a scenario now. Okay, now we can't go to the lab, so how would you want to use household items to design a calorimeter? Okay, so you need to explain your design and what aspect was most important when designing this calorimeter. Okay, designing this calorimeter might not be something that you will use or do in your normal face-to-face. Okay, and you also must remember that our learning outcome when we did our course pro forma, okay, when we developed this one, was more face-to-face. Okay, so in normal exam, when you have this question in final exam, yes, the students are sitting in isolation from each other, they have no help, and they are taking, I mean, they are looking for the information, or they what information they have, and they will try to answer those questions. And if they could answer that question, you tend to know, oh, okay, they have this knowledge of how to look at heat change and all that. But when you say, oh, if I ask them to design this calorimeter, actually it's got nothing to do with my learning outcome. Not really true, because calorimeter does talk about the concept of heat loss, heat transfer, efficiency of calorimeter and all that. So actually they are getting, by doing the assignment, maybe you don't ask them to build it, okay? So you probably ask them to design it on a piece of paper or online with some sort of what's this some computer programming thingy, and you ask them to explain the design, what aspects. So instead of using, they might use a tin, a aluminum tin rather than a plastic container, and they should justify why I use the tin as my calorimeter in designing my calorimeter. So those are actually conceptual understanding. That is why instead of just calculating the calorie of food and using the formula, they are actually learning about the concepts, the basic scientific concepts. And then it's not wrong for you to give this question, because you say, look, at the end of it, I must know whether my students are able to calculate, because that is my learning outcome. At the end of it, it's not wrong if you give them that question, okay, calculate this. But even if all your students give you the same answer, okay, because they can copy or whatever it is, the other part where they designed it and they explain to you what a calorimeter, their conceptual understanding, is where you can start differentiating what student A from student B. So when it comes to part where you actually have to give them points or marks or whatever it is, you can actually be that it's more valid for you to say, okay, this person gets this amount and this person only gets this amount. So you need to try to find for examination questions or tasks or activities that actually shows through meaningful learning. Okay. Of course, e-portfolio. Okay, so definitely all of you all have portfolios. Okay, but the important thing about this portfolio is, I know when we started off with this online thing, our university came up with one of the assessment method is using portfolios. Okay, portfolios we have hardly used before this pandemic started. So, but it is a good way of collecting or getting an understanding of what students learning or how students learning has been progressed. But many of us keep this portfolio until the 14th week and say, okay, give me a portfolio, I want to see what you have done. But portfolios, okay, as we support students, should be collected as work in progress. Okay, now we finished topic 1, learning outcome 1. Among all the tasks that we did, which task do you feel that was, and why do you think? So you can have some reflective questions that can support the students as they go along. So once they have, okay, for learning outcome 1, my lecturer has given me support to go on. Maybe the second learning outcome, you want them to create or put entries into the portfolio with um, less feedback from you. And maybe the last one is completely on their own. And you might be able to get a variation now, okay? But you cannot leave it to them and say, look, I want you to come up with an e-portfolio because this is what we wanted. Because students are not exposed to this kind of assessment. So they need to be supported. Okay, so it's important for you to give feedback. And just like what you said just now, asking a case study. So you can give a real life scenario. Okay, this is a laboratory. If you're teaching a course on lab management, okay, so you say, okay, this is a scenario of a lab, in a company, and I want you to write a report and give their recommendations. So everything is, whatever they have learned in the classroom management, they can use and apply here. And you may have to give different case studies to different groups. You may ask them to work in groups, because asking them to write individually might be too overwhelming. And writing a report may not be the actual outcome of the study in that sense. What I'm trying to say is, in lab management, if you look at your learning outcome, there might not be a learning outcome that says students must be able to write a report. There might not be one of the learning outcomes. So asking them to write a report actually is authentic assessment. But if you ask each individual students to do on their own, there might also be a cognitive load, which would lead them to be pressured and stressed. And they have no choice, but then that is when they start, okay, let me cut and paste and put it in. Okay. Okay. And there must be a constructive alignment. What I mean by constructive alignment is, okay, I give you a very simple case. If your course, let's say your course says students are able to identify the first 10 elements of the periodic table. That is the learning outcome of your course. So in your face-to-face exam questions, it may look something like this. Okay, what is the name of the element C, or what would the symbol of helium be? So they might have an understanding of, because they are able to identify the first 10 elements. So it's okay, because you are quite confident if the students can write carbon, or the students can write He, and plus with your activities and your tasks, you say, oh yeah, I think the student has achieved their learning outcome, okay, for this course particularly. But if it was an open book test, then would you still ask the same type of questions? Would you say, okay, it doesn't matter, it's an open book test, but I'm going to ask them the same question? Because now it is a straightforward question, okay, it's a lower order thinking question. It is a question where it is a factual question, so students can just cut and paste, okay? So of course, I know all of you are going to put, no, I can't do this. Yeah, you don't do that. Okay. So maybe, okay, of course you will not do that, but you would design probably a poster. Okay. Maybe your question will be, okay, design a poster showing at least 5 elements of the periodic table. And I mean, I don't know, maybe 5 elements, and then, you have something along that line. And when you give this kind of task, you normally will use a rubric. Okay, you use a rubric because the task is very open-ended, And you give a rubric because you want to show them, okay, these are the criteria that I will be looking for. So I want you to focus on these criteria, okay? But sometimes we also do not put emphasis, do not put the correct emphasis on the criteria. Let's say now you are teaching the course that says, okay, students need to know 10, 10, list down the first 10 elements of the periodic table. And you say, okay, I don't want them to just write it down because they can copy it. So I want to give them an idea of how they want to talk about these elements, okay? And they need to write the correct elements, okay? So if your rubric is about the title of the poster, the elements, okay, so they need to know the elements. These are actually your learning outcomes, okay? Illustration of the elements, okay? And the creativity of the poster. You have to show that this, if let's say student A has got a wonderful title and has got a very good creativity, of the poster was colorful and all, and you give 4, okay, but the elements and the symbols and the illustrations were, there was nothing, you give them 1, and you will find that your students get 10 upon 16, 10 upon 16. But if another student had a horrible title or not very well presented title, and the presentation of the poster was not well, but the elements and the illustrations were very well done, he also will get 10. So now you are being your tool that you use, which is the rubric, doesn't reflect the learning outcome, because your learning outcome doesn't talk about writing a good title for a poster. It is talking about the elements that you want them to create in the poster. So you have to be very careful about the elements, and the illustrations were very well done. He also, the scoring, especially if you want to use it as a scoring tool, okay, that, because if we as a scoring tool, because if you have said, okay, title and creativity, yes, this is your work ethics, okay, when your boss tomorrow comes in and says you need to do a presentation, I want you to do a good presentation, but more importantly, the content that you're presenting is equally important, is actually much more important. So you should make sure the title and the poster and the creativity and the title poster should carry minimal marks, maybe 1, absent or present. You did it well or you didn't do it. And these symbols and illustration should have higher marks, so that when you add up the mark, a student who actually achieves your learning outcome should reflect in their final grades. So if I can actually identify the elements, and I actually give a good illustration of the elements, I should get a better score than someone who just gave a good title and the creativity of the poster. And this is where we tend to make mistakes when we use rubrics that are not designed to our learning outcome. So you have to be careful. I mean, I don't want to go into detail because I know I don't have time, but these are things that we need to be aware of. Okay, don't know whether, okay. So in my parting words, what I need you all, what I want to share here is online assessment requires a conceptual change. Okay, you need to create a supportive environment, and I think many of us, maybe even we don't think about it, but we realize that if we do not have that rapport with our students, it's very difficult for us to progress. Okay, we need our students' voice. We need them to be in our discussion. Okay, and the most important thing is we need to empathize with our student, because remember, I think one of my earlier slides is, it's all over the internet. We are all in the same storm, but we are not in the same boat. So a lot of students are actually struggling. Okay, so you need to engage in formative feedbacks, okay, and find partnerships with your students. So even your rubric, that imagine if you do a good rubric, you can actually give it to the students when you give them the task, and discuss it with them and say, this is what I want you, these are the things that you should be thinking about when you are doing this poster. I'm just giving you an example. Of course, yours will be much higher. And you can also use that rubric to ask your students to evaluate each other. Okay, like, okay, I think her work is, her elements were good or whatever, and they can evaluate their peers. They can also do self-evaluation, and these skills are actually skills that are required for them to become autonomous learners. Okay, and use reliable and valid tools, like what I said just now. Sometimes our scoring rubric tends to get a bit skewed, so we're not actually measuring the actual learning outcome. And then many of us, in fact, we have to fill out these forms where we need to say how many of them have achieved the learning outcome. So sometimes our learning outcome has to be measured in a reliable and valid way. Okay, so and the assessment process must be transparent in the sense that I think if you know that this is the method that, or this is the scheme that you're going to use to assess them, I think it's not wrong if you want to share with them so that students will know, okay, how do I get to complete this work with the support of my lecturer. Okay, so thank you.